It started with a plane ticket and a sentence I'll never forget. "You're too old to fly with us, Dad. Just take care of the house while we're gone." She said it lightly, almost kindly, as if she were offering me mercy instead of exile. Her husband stood behind her, checking the boarding passes, nodding like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. I remember the sunlight hitting the kitchen counter, the smell of coffee that had gone cold, and the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us. That's the thing about heartbreak. It never happens with thunder. It happens with background noise. I looked at her, my daughter, Emily, and for a moment I didn't see the woman with a suitcase in her hand. I saw the little girl who once made me paper airplanes and swore she'd fly one day, so high the clouds would look jealous. And now she was flying. Just not with me. They were heading to Italy for a 2-week vacation, something she'd been saving up for, something she'd talked about for months. I was happy for her. Truly. But somewhere between her plans and her pride, she decided I didn't belong in them. "Dad," she continued, setting the tickets down, "it's a long flight. You get anxious with travel, and you're back." "I can handle a flight, Em," I said quietly. "I know," she said, "but it's just easier this way. You can water the plants, feed Bella, and, well, just relax. You deserve some rest." Her tone was gentle, almost patronizing, the kind you use with someone fragile. Except I wasn't fragile. I was forgotten. I nodded slowly. "Sure. Someone's got to keep the fort standing." She smiled like she'd won a small argument and kissed my cheek. "You're the best, Dad." They left 3 days later. The house felt twice as big and half as alive. That first night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the sun went down, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. I told myself it didn't matter, that kids grow up, priorities shift, love gets rearranged. But something inside me had cracked, and cracks don't make noise until they spread. I looked around the house, the one I'd built, painted, fixed, and filled with every piece of her childhood. The pencil marks on the pantry door still showed her height through the years. The fridge still had one of her crooked drawings of the two of us flying paper planes, smiling under a sun too big for the sky. Now the only thing flying was her plane, without me on it. I walked into her old room. It smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The bookshelf was mostly empty now, but one of her childhood trophies still stood there. Best Paper Airplane Design, 2003. I picked it up, brushed off the dust, and couldn't help but smile. "You got your wings, kid," I whispered. Guess the old pilot's grounded. The next morning, I got a message from her, cheerful, full of emojis and airport photos. "We just boarded. Don't forget to water the orchids. Love you." I typed back. "Have a great flight. Don't worry about the house, I've got it handled." But after I hit send, I stared at those words, "I've got it handled." Because maybe I did. Maybe for the first time in years, I could handle more than she thought I could. Maybe this time, I'd take care of the house, but not the way she expected. The days passed quietly. I mowed the lawn, fed Bella, dusted the shelves, and thought. A lot. Every morning I made coffee, sat by the window, and wrote in the small notebook I kept since Laura, my late wife, passed. I wrote about Emily. About how proud I was of her. About how somewhere along the way, pride and pity got tangled in her love for me. She didn't mean to hurt me. I knew that. But she had forgotten that I wasn't just her father, I was still me. The man who taught her to drive, to balance a checkbook, to stand up for herself. The man who carried her on his shoulders and promised her the world. I wasn't obsolete. Just uninvited. Then came the photo. 3 days into their trip, she posted a picture online, her and her husband at a vineyard in Tuscany. Both holding glasses of wine, smiles wide and free. The caption read, "Finally living life, no worries, no responsibilities." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even meant for me. But it was the first time she'd ever described a life without me in it as no responsibilities. That was the moment. the one when silence turned into decision. I didn't know what my revenge would look like yet, only that it wouldn't be about hurting her. It would be about reminding her. Reminding her what family actually means, and what gets lost when you start calling love a burden. I got up, poured another cup of coffee, and went into the study. The sunlight hit the old globe in the corner, the one Emily used to spin and point at random countries, saying, "Let's go here someday, Dad." Maybe I couldn't go to Italy, but there were other places I could go. And maybe there was something to be said for showing your child that life doesn't retire you just because they stop seeing you in motion. I smiled faintly. "All right, Emily," I said aloud to the empty room. "You fly your way. I'll fly mine." I didn't know it then, but that decision, that quiet vow over cold coffee and memory, was the first domino in everything that came next. Because while they were flying over oceans, chasing sunsets, and posting pictures of wine glasses, I was building something else, something that would wait for them when they returned. Not punishment. Not resentment. Just a lesson carved in the language of love and legacy. "You're too old to fly with us, Dad." Maybe. But I was about to remind her that wings don't come with an expiration date. I didn't expect the betrayal to arrive by email. The subject line read, "Just checking in, Red Heart." At first I smiled. I thought it was Emily sending photos or asking about Bella, maybe even apologizing for how she phrased that "too old to fly" comment. But when I opened it, I found a long message, written not by my daughter, but by her husband, Adam. "Hey Mike! Hope all's well. We're having an amazing time. Quick favor, I spoke to the realtor you recommended years ago about maybe getting an appraisal on your place. No pressure. Just curious what it's worth these days. It's a big property, and you've got great light for a remodel. Maybe when we get back, we could talk options. Could be smart to sell while the market's up." I read that last line twice, then a third time. Sell while the market's up. My house. The one where Emily learned to walk. The one Laura and I rebuilt after the storm, plank by plank. The one I planned to leave to her, not because it was valuable, but because it was home. I leaned back, hands trembling over the keyboard. I didn't reply. Not yet. I just sat there, listening to the refrigerator hum again, the same soundtrack that had filled the silence the day they left. After a while, I forwarded the email to myself, added a note on top. "When love starts treating memories like assets, it's time to change the math." Then I shut the laptop. The next morning, I went into town for groceries. On my way back, I passed the old hardware store where I used to buy lumber. The sign out front was faded now, but the owner, Chuck, still waved from behind the counter when he saw me. "Morning, Mike! Haven't seen you in a while." "Keeping busy," I said. "Got a few projects in mind." He smiled. "Good. Idle hands make restless hearts." He was right. And I suddenly realized I hadn't built anything since Laura died. Not furniture, not plans, not even hope. Maybe it was time to start again. That night, I opened the closet and found the box of letters Laura used to keep, receipts, notes, old postcards. Among them was one with her handwriting on the envelope. "For Emily, when she forgets." I didn't remember this one. My throat tightened as I opened it carefully. "Sweetheart, if you ever grow too busy for your father, remember this. I married him not because he was perfect, but because he never stopped showing up. Don't let life make you think showing up is small. It's everything." Her handwriting trembled slightly at the end. She must have written it during her last hospital stay. I folded the letter gently and sat back, the paper soft and worn against my fingers. "When she forgets." I'd been so focused on the sting of being left out that I hadn't realized this moment, this distance, was something Laura had already seen coming. And suddenly, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt responsible. If I didn't fix this, if I didn't teach Emily what home really meant, she'd lose something much bigger than a house. She'd lose her compass. A few days later, I got another email, this one directly from Emily. "Dad! Just a heads up, Adam asked a friend to stop by and take some photos of the living room for fun, to show his colleagues back home. Don't worry if someone rings the bell, it's just them getting a few shots for their project. Love you. Photos. Of the house. For fun. It sounded harmless, except when I checked the cameras the next afternoon, I saw two strangers walking through my living room, taking wide-angle photos, measuring the walls, chatting about potential. I watched them on the screen, a middle-aged man and a young woman, talking about my home like it was a listing. Good bones, one of them said. Definitely room for renovation. I muted the feed before I threw the tablet across the table. Instead, I poured myself a drink and stared out the window until the sun went down. That night, I didn't write in my notebook. I just sat there with Laura's letter in my hand, reading it over and over until the words blurred. Don't let life make you think showing up is small. It's everything. They called the next day, cheerful as ever. Dad! You won't believe this vineyard, Emily said through the speaker, laughter in her voice. And the view! It's like Tuscany was made for postcards. I smiled softly. Sounds beautiful. It is, she said. You'd love it. Well, maybe not the flight. Right, I said. Too old for that, remember? She went silent for a second. Dad, I didn't mean it that way. I know, I said. Don't worry about it. Enjoy your trip. We talked about the weather, the dog, the house, small talk, polite and harmless. Then, right before hanging up, she said something that changed everything. Oh, by the way, don't freak out if you see a for sale sign in the front yard next week. Adam's just running some comps for fun. Love you. The call ended. I stared at the phone, the word for sale echoing in my chest like thunder in a canyon. That night, I walked through the house again. Room by room. Laura's sewing room. The kitchen where Emily spilled her first glass of wine and cried because she thought I'd be mad. The backyard where I taught her how to plant tomatoes. Every memory had fingerprints. And now, my own child wanted to scrub them away and list them on a spreadsheet. I sat down at my desk, opened my notebook and wrote. They think I'm the caretaker. Maybe it's time to remind them who built the house. And that's when the plan started to take shape. Not out of bitterness. I didn't want revenge in the usual sense. I wanted her to remember. To feel what home really means, not as an inheritance, but as a heartbeat. If she was so ready to sell what I built, then she needed to understand what it cost to build it in the first place. The next morning, I went into town again. I met with my lawyer, an old friend named Mark. We hadn't spoken much since Laura's funeral. He poured coffee, leaned back in his chair, and listened as I told him everything. When I finished, he nodded slowly. You're not angry, Mike? You're hurt. And that's worse, because hurt can get quiet and smart. I'm not here to punish her, I said. I'm here to wake her up. He smiled. Then I think I know what you're trying to do. Over the next few hours, we drew up documents, subtle, simple, completely legal. I updated the deed, restructured the trust, and added a clause Laura would have appreciated. In the event of sale, proceeds shall be donated to a foundation in Laura's name, unless otherwise approved by the grantor. Grantor. That was me. If Emily wanted to turn a home into an investment, she'd learn that love doesn't liquidate so easily. But that was only step one. When they came back, everything looked the same, the grass trimmed, the flowers blooming, the coffee machine gleaming like I'd polished it for a parade. They hugged me, tired and tan, full of stories about art, wine, and freedom. Dad, you look good, Emily said, dropping her suitcase in the hallway. Did you rest at all? Plenty, I said. I even did some thinking. Oh, Adam joked. That sounds dangerous. I smiled. Maybe. They laughed, oblivious. But as I looked at them, my daughter and the man who saw my house as a portfolio, I felt the calmest I had in years. Because they didn't know yet. Not about the clause. Not about the papers. Not about the quiet mirror I was about to hold up to them. For now, they just saw the old man who stayed behind, watered the plants, and kept the lights on. And that was fine. Because the lesson was already waiting for them, right here, within these walls they thought they owned, inside the home they didn't realize was about to teach them back. They had left me behind once. Now it was their turn to come home and find out what it feels like to be the one left out. I didn't expect the betrayal to come wrapped in politeness. But it rarely does it? Sometimes it's not a slammed door or a cruel word. Sometimes it's a single email that sounds like concern, or a favor dressed up as help. This one arrived 4 days after they left for Italy. Subject: just checking in, red heart. At first I smiled. I thought it was from Emily, a quick note, maybe a few photos from Rome or Venice. I even poured myself a fresh cup of coffee before opening it. But the message wasn't from my daughter. It was from Adam, her husband. Hey Mike. Hope everything's good back home. Italy's been amazing so far. Emily's loving it here. Quick thing, we've been thinking it might be smart to get an updated appraisal on your house. Totally no rush or pressure. You've got a great location, and prices are high right now. I reached out to a realtor friend to maybe swing by while we're gone, just for reference. Thought it couldn't hurt to know what the place is worth these days. Hope that's okay. I read it twice. Then again. I wasn't sure what stunned me more, that he'd done it, or that he'd written it like it was nothing. Appraisal. Just for reference. You know, like checking the weather. He didn't say our house, but the tone carried it. That quiet assumption that ownership could change hands as easily as permission slips. I stared at the email until the words lost their shape. Then I got up, turned off the coffee pot, and just stood there. The refrigerator hummed behind me, the same steady sound that filled the silence since Laura died. It was strange. I wasn't angry yet. Not exactly. It was more like a numbness spreading through logic. Because on paper, maybe it made sense. They were young, ambitious, modern. To them, a house was equity, not history. But to me, this house was the last living memory of Laura. Every wall, every floorboard, every paint chip still had her touch. You can't measure that in market value. I forwarded the email to myself, added a small note at the top, something I'd probably never show anyone. The day love started sounding like real estate. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. The next morning, I went into town. Bought groceries. Talked to the cashier about the weather. Drove back in silence. At the last second, I turned off the main road and pulled into the parking lot of the old hardware store. The sign was sun-faded and half missing, but the smell inside, sawdust, paint, and rust, was the same. Chuck, the owner, looked up from behind the counter. Mike Carter! Haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, I said, smiling faintly. Figured I'd see if you're still selling the good hammers. He laughed. You planning to build something again? Maybe, I said. Or fix something. He nodded. Either way, it's good to work with your hands. Keeps the heart from overthinking. He was right. I bought a few tools I didn't really need, new brushes, a sanding block, a small set of chisels, and drove home feeling lighter, though I didn't know why. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, 2 strangers stood outside, a woman in a blazer, holding a clipboard, and a man with a camera around his neck. Good afternoon, she said brightly. We're from the realtor's office. Adam sent us, just a quick photo set for the property. Shouldn't take long. I blinked. The property? Yes, sir. Lovely space you've got here. Great light. Don't worry, we'll stay out of your way. Before I could say a word, they were already stepping inside, polite, smiling, efficient. The man crouched near the window, snapping wide shots of the living room. The woman ran her hand along the banister. Original wood? She asked. Yes, I said. My wife and I installed it ourselves. Beautiful craftsmanship. She said absent-mindedly, already writing notes. Buyers love that. Buyers. The word hit me harder than I expected. I didn't throw them out. I didn't shout. I just stood there, letting them take their pictures. When they finally left, thanking me for my time, I closed the door and leaned against it. The silence was heavy, the kind you feel in your chest. I walked to the study, poured a drink, and sat by the window. The sunlight was dimming. Outside, Bella barked once and then went quiet again. I took out my notebook, the one I'd been filling since Laura passed, and wrote just one sentence. They see a listing. I see a lifetime. Then I closed it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Laura's voice in my head, that soft way she had of grounding everything. Mike, she used to say, don't ever let the world turn love into numbers. Around midnight I got up and went through her old things. At the bottom of a box, under faded photographs and old Christmas cards, I found an envelope in her handwriting. It said, "For Emily, when she forgets." My breath caught. Inside was a letter. "Sweetheart, someday you might grow too busy for your father. It happens, the world gets loud, time gets short. But when that day comes, remember, I married him not because he was perfect, but because he never stopped showing up. Don't let life make you think showing up is small. It's everything." Her handwriting wavered at the end. She must have written it from her hospital bed. I sat there for a long time, the paper shaking in my hands. And that's when something shifted. Up until then, I'd been hurt. Small. Left behind. But reading that letter, I felt something else, clarity. This wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being needed in a way Emily no longer understood. If I didn't remind her, gently, firmly, what family means, she'd spend her life trading meaning for convenience. And that's not the kind of legacy Laura would forgive me for allowing. A few days later, Emily called from Florence. "Dad! You won't believe the food here," she said, laughing. "I'm gaining 5 pounds a day." "I'll pretend to be shocked," I said, smiling. She giggled, then said casually, "Hey, by the way, don't freak out if there's a little sign in front of the house when we get back. Adam's just doing some comps. It's not serious." "A sign?" "Yeah, you know, for sale signs. Just temporary. He's seeing how the market reacts." The world went quiet for a moment. "Emily," I said slowly, "do you know what that house is worth to me?" "Of course," she said. "That's why we'd never sell without your okay. It's just business?" I asked gently. She hesitated. "Dad, you take everything so personally." "It's just data." "Right," I said softly. "Just data." We said goodbye soon after, both pretending everything was fine. But that night, I walked through the house room by room, touching the walls, tracing the grooves Laura painted over, the pencil marks where Emily's height was recorded every birthday. Every corner whispered something back. That's when I knew this wasn't anger anymore. It was duty. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mark. We met at his office downtown, same place I'd signed the mortgage decades ago. He listened quietly while I explained everything. When I finished, he took off his glasses, leaned back, and said, "Mike, you're not trying to punish her. You're trying to raise her again, just older this time." "Exactly," I said. "She's forgotten what things mean. Then let's remind her." Together, we rewrote my estate plan. I created a foundation in Laura's name, the Laura Carter Home Fund, dedicated to helping families keep their homes after loss. The clause was simple. If the house is ever sold, the proceeds go entirely to the foundation unless otherwise approved by the grantor. Grantor, me. That way, no one could sell it for profit. Only for purpose. When I left his office, I felt lighter, not vindicated, but aligned. Like I was honoring Laura, protecting the house, and teaching Emily all at once. When they finally came home 2 weeks later, I had everything in order, the deed filed, the documents notarized, and a calm smile waiting. They arrived mid-afternoon, tan, glowing, full of stories. "Dad, the trip was amazing," Emily said, hugging me tight. "You'd have loved it, Well, except maybe the plane. I smiled. You'd be surprised what I can handle. She laughed, assuming it was a joke. Adam grinned, unloading their bags. The house was spotless. Dinner was on the stove. To them, everything looked the same. But they didn't know that the walls around them no longer belonged to them, not even in imagination. For now, I just poured the wine and listened to their stories. I let them talk about Italy, about freedom, about how refreshed they felt. Because the real journey, the one that would teach them what home meant, had only just begun. And as I watched my daughter smile across the table, glass of red wine in hand, I thought, one day soon you'll understand, Em. This isn't about age, or travel, or ownership. This is about remembering the roots that hold you steady when everything else starts flying away. And when you do, I'll be right here. Not waiting for an apology. Just waiting for you to land. The night after they returned from Italy, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet except for the slow rhythm of the ceiling fan. From the guest room down the hall, I could hear Adam's faint snoring and Emily's soft laughter through the wall, that half-asleep giggle she had since childhood. It should have made me smile. Instead, it made my chest ache. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee and my notebook open, staring at a blank page. The words didn't come easily this time. Every thought felt like walking through wet cement, heavy, deliberate. Because I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. Love without boundaries turns into pity. And pity is just disrespect wearing perfume. They didn't mean to hurt me. I knew that. They were just young and certain, that dangerous mix that makes people confuse care with control. But somewhere along the line, they'd started seeing me not as a man, not even as a father, but as a fixture. A part of the house. I'd become reliable furniture. Always there. Always quiet. Always keeping the lights on. And the cruelest part? I'd helped build that illusion myself, by being too accommodating, too patient, too willing to say, "It's fine." It wasn't fine anymore. So, I made a decision. I was going to teach them what it means to leave someone behind, but in a way that wouldn't break us, only bend us toward truth. Not revenge through loss, but revelation through absence. They thought I couldn't fly anymore? Then I'd show them what happens when the ground they took for granted suddenly moves beneath them. The first step was simple: disappear. Not completely, just enough to make them look for me. That Sunday morning, I woke before dawn, packed a small bag, and wrote a note on the counter. Gone for a while. Don't worry. The house will take care of itself now. Then I slipped out quietly, locked the door, and drove east. I didn't go far, just to the lake cabin I built with Laura years ago. It was about an hour outside town, tucked between pine trees and still water. I hadn't been there since her passing. When I arrived, the place smelled of dust and cedar. The windows were fogged, the air still. But when I opened the shutters, sunlight poured in like forgiveness. I exhaled. Hello again, old friend. The days that followed were quiet, almost monastic. I fixed the dock, cleaned the roof, patched a few broken boards. Each nail and screw felt like prayer, rhythm returning to a man who'd forgotten the music of his own hands. I cooked simple meals, wrote in my notebook, and watched the water ripple when wind touched it. And somewhere in that silence, the plan took clearer shape. Revenge wasn't about punishing Emily. It was about teaching her the weight of absence. She thought my stillness was weakness. My patience, passivity. But soon, she'd learn that consistency is a form of strength, one that holds up entire families. If she was going to treat me like a caretaker, then she needed to understand what caretakers really do. They keep the world spinning quietly, until the day they stop, and suddenly everyone notices gravity. So I decided I'd stop. No reminders. No calls. No grocery lists or scheduled maintenance. Let the house breathe without me. Let it remind her who truly held it together. By the third day, the phone started ringing. At first, short calls. Missed ones? Then longer messages. Dad, it's me. Just wondering where you went. Bella misses you. Later that evening. Hey, Dad, so funny thing, the sprinklers stopped working. Adam tried to fix them, but now the backyard's a swamp. Call when you can. I didn't. By day 5. Dad, please call back. I'm starting to worry. You didn't tell anyone where you were going. Are you okay? I smiled faintly and looked out at the lake. The sky was turning gold. I'm okay, sweetheart, I whispered. I just need you to notice the space I used to fill. By the end of the week, they drove out to the cabin. I saw their car through the trees, headlights bouncing on the dirt road, engine cutting off. Emily got out first, arms folded, frustration barely masking concern. Adam followed, carrying a bag of groceries like peace offering. Dad, she called. Are you here? I opened the door slowly. Her face softened when she saw me. You scared me half to death. Why didn't you answer? I needed quiet, I said simply. You could have told us. I could have, I said, but you might have said no. That disarmed her. Dad, she began but stopped. I gestured toward the table. Come sit. There's coffee. We sat there, the three of us, around a small wooden table that had seen decades of conversations, laughter, and mourning. They told me about their trip, their new work plans, their dreams of maybe remodeling the house one day. I listened. Really listened. Then I said quietly, why sell something that's still living? Emily frowned. What do you mean? That house isn't just wood and nails. It's history. It's family. It's where your mother's voice still echoes if you listen closely. Dad, we weren't actually going to sell. Maybe not literally, I said, but you were willing to treat it like an option. That's the same thing. She looked down. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said gently. And that's okay. You didn't mean harm. You just forgot what permanence feels like. Adam shifted uncomfortably. Mike, we didn't want to hurt you. We just thought. I know, I said. You thought you were being practical. He nodded. Let me tell you something about practicality. I continued. It builds houses but destroys homes. You can own every square inch and still lose the heart of it. Silence. Emily's eyes filled slowly, the way they used to when she was a little girl caught in a lie she didn't mean to tell. Dad, she whispered. I'm sorry. I smiled faintly. Don't be. You're learning. That night I let them stay. I made dinner, pasta, simple and familiar. We sat on the porch afterward, the stars sharp above us, the lake still as glass. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done in years. I forgot how peaceful this place is, she said softly. That's because you stopped being quiet long enough to notice. She nodded. Mom used to say that too. She did. I miss her, she said. So do I said. Every day. And in that stillness, with the sound of crickets rising around us, I knew the plan was working, not through guilt, but through grace. She was remembering. The next morning, before they left, I handed Emily a small envelope. What's this? She asked. Something your mother wrote, I said. Read it when you get home. She smiled uncertainly. You sure? Positive. They hugged me tightly before leaving. Adam looked sheepish. You're a tougher man than I thought, Mike. Not tougher, I said. Just older enough to know what matters. When their car disappeared down the road, I stood there, feeling the quiet settle back in. I thought about Laura, about the years we built that house together, about the child we raised inside it. And I knew what I needed to do next. It wasn't enough for Emily to read her mother's letter. She needed to live it. So, I decided to prepare one final step, something that would show her, in real, practical terms, the cost of neglecting love. The house wasn't for sale. But its meaning was. And she was about to learn its value. I drove back to town that evening. Parked in the driveway. Walked up to the front door. For a long time, I just stood there, looking at it. Then I whispered to the empty porch. All right, Laura. Time for the final lesson. I unlocked the door and stepped back inside. The walls greeted me like old friends. The air smelled like memory. And for the first time in a long while, I felt not like a relic, but like a man on a mission. Because love, real love, doesn't end when people stop listening. It just changes its voice. And mine was about to get louder. When I came back from the lake, the air in the house felt different. Still familiar, but hollow, as if it knew something had shifted. The chairs sat too neatly. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the fresheners Emily liked to use. Everything was tidy, quiet, lifeless, a museum of comfort. And I realized something: comfort can become the cruelest kind of decay. That night, I poured myself a drink and opened Laura's old notebook, the one where she'd written renovation plans, grocery lists, and little thoughts in the margins. On one page she'd scribbled, "Teach her to build, not to buy." That was all the permission I needed. The next morning, I called Mark, my lawyer. "I need to finalize the Carter Trust," I said. "Make it airtight." "You sure about this?" he asked. "Absolutely." And add an addendum: the house can't be sold, transferred, or refinanced until both grantors are deceased. He hesitated. "Grantors?" "Yes." Add Laura back in. He paused for a long second. "You're aware she's—" "I know. But she built half of this house, Mark. Legally or not, her name belongs on that paper." He sighed, then smiled faintly. "You've got poetry in your contracts, Mike?" "Just legacy," I said. "That's the real estate that matters." He promised to prepare everything by the end of the week. Next, I drove downtown to the community center, the one Emily used to volunteer at in high school. It was under renovation, plastered dust everywhere, but the old director, June, was still there. She looked up when I walked in. "Well, look what the wind dragged in. Haven't seen you since the memorial." "Been keeping busy," I said. "Listen, June, I want to make a donation." "Anonymous." Her eyebrows rose. "That's generous of you." "For what purpose?" "For the home maintenance program. Roof repairs, plumbing, whatever helps keep old houses standing." June smiled softly. That was Laura's favorite initiative. "I know." We filled out the paperwork. I signed Anonymous Benefactor, in memory of Laura Carter. But I added one quiet instruction at the bottom of the form. "If my daughter Emily Carter ever applies for help through this program, prioritize her request, but do not tell her who funded it." June looked at me curiously. "Is this part of some lesson?" "Let's call it faith," I said. Over the next few days, I began removing my presents from the house, carefully, methodically. I packed my photos, my books, my jackets. I left the furniture, the dishes, the little touches that made the place comfortable. But I took the soul of it, the things that made it mine. Every box I sealed, I labeled with quiet precision. Not gone. Just elsewhere. Then I moved them to the lake cabin. By Thursday, the house looked perfect, clean, polished, and unsettlingly hollow. That weekend, Emily called. "Dad, are you home?" "Always," I said, smiling to myself. "Good. We're stopping by tomorrow. We have something to show you." I hung up and looked around at the empty walls. "Perfect timing," I murmured. They arrived mid-morning, smiling, full of energy. Emily carried a tablet. "Okay, don't freak out," she said, grinning. "But Adam and I drafted some redesign ideas for the house. Just conceptually." She showed me the screen. It displayed a glossy 3D rendering of my home, walls torn down, rooms merged, a shiny new kitchen where Laura's old oak table used to be. "Modern," Adam said proudly. "Clean. Open space. We'd obviously keep your room intact, of course." I stared at it for a long moment. "You'd keep my room?" "Of course," Emily said quickly. "Dad, we'd never." "It's fine," I interrupted softly. "You're right. It's a beautiful design." Her shoulders relaxed in relief. You really think so? I nodded. Absolutely. In fact, I walked over to the cabinet, pulled out a file, and handed it to her. Here. You'll need this first. What is it? The new deed. She frowned. New deed? Yes. For the Carter House Trust. She opened the folder and scanned the papers. Her brow furrowed. Dad, what is this clause? Property held in joint grantorship by Michael and Laura Carter until both parties are deceased. I smiled gently. It means you can't change it. You can live in it, love in it, raise your kids there if you want, but you can't sell it. Not without both of us signing off. She looked at me, confusion flickering into realization. But Mom! Exactly, I said softly. Silence. Adam shifted awkwardly. That's creative, Mike? I shrugged. Just protecting the foundation. You know how it is. Emily's eyes shimmered. Dad, why would you do this? Because someday, I said, you'll understand that you can't flip love like a property. They didn't argue. Not out loud, anyway. Adam excused himself to take a call. Emily sat down across from me, hands twisting nervously. I didn't mean to make you feel like we were erasing Mom, she said finally. I know. I just thought maybe starting fresh would help. Starting fresh doesn't mean burning the old house down, Emily. Sometimes it means learning how to live with the ghosts gracefully. She looked away. It's just hard, Dad. Sometimes this place feels frozen. It's not frozen, I said quietly. It's waiting. She frowned. For what? For you to remember. That night, after they left, I walked through the house again. The moonlight fell through the windows like silver ribbons, lighting the empty spaces where pictures used to hang. I ran my hand over the wall near the kitchen, the one Laura painted while Emily was still in high school. There were faint brush strokes where she'd written, under the paint, "Keep this home kind." And that's when the idea came, the final touch of the trap. Not punishment. Poetry. I sat down at the dining table, opened my notebook, and began to write. Emily, if you're reading this, it means the house is finally yours, and you've learned what that truly means. You once told me I was too old to fly. Maybe you were right. But flying isn't about planes. It's about perspective. I didn't build this house to own it. I built it to belong somewhere. To give you a place to land when the world got too loud. One day, when you have children of your own, they'll need a place like that too, a home that doesn't depend on market value but on memory. The papers you hold protect this place, but the lesson protects you. Don't forget that difference. Love isn't fragile, Emily, it's just quiet. And when it goes unacknowledged too long, it teaches instead of pleads. You can change the furniture, the colors, the layout, but promise me one thing, leave one corner untouched. One small piece of the past, so you always know where you came from. I signed it simply. Love, Dad. Then I placed it in a sealed envelope and hid it in the drawer of Laura's old sewing desk. She'd find it when she was ready, not before. The next day, I called June at the community center. About that donation, I said. Can you make the fund active starting next month? Already done, she said. Want me to put your name on the wall? No. I want Laura's. There was a pause. Then she said softly, she'd be proud. I hope so, I said. This is her lesson too. By the end of the week, everything was set. The legal papers, the donation, the letter, and me, I was ready too. I packed another small bag for the cabin, leaving the house open, clean, waiting. On the counter, I placed one last note for Emily. You once asked me to take care of the house. I did. Now it's your turn. Don't worry, it will teach you what I couldn't. Then I turned off the lights, stepped outside, and locked the door one final time. As I walked to the car, the dawn was breaking, pale light spreading across the yard like forgiveness. I smiled. All right, Laura, I whispered. The trap's set. Not a trap to catch. A trap to awaken. 2 weeks passed before the storm came, not of weather, but of realization. It began with a phone call late one Thursday night. I was at the cabin, half asleep, when my phone buzzed insistently on the table. "Dad?" Her voice cracked halfway through the word. "Emily? What's wrong?" I can't, we got a letter from the county. Something about the trust. They said the property's frozen for reassessment, and any remodeling has to be cleared through the board. Dad, I tried to call the bank and they said that everything's perfectly legal. I finished for her. Silence. "Dad, what did you do?" "I took care of the house," I said. Her breath hitched. "You locked us out of our own home plans." "No," I said softly. "I locked you into its memory." She didn't answer. Just the thin sound of breathing on the line. Finally she whispered, "You really went this far, just to prove a point?" "Not a point," I said. "A promise. To your mother. To you." Then I told her the truth, the trust, the foundation, the donation in Laura's name. How every penny from a potential sale would go to preserving homes for families like ours. On the other end, she said nothing. Then I heard the smallest sound, not anger, not disbelief, but something deeper. The sound of pride breaking open. "Dad," she said finally, voice trembling, "I think I hate how right you are." That weekend, they drove to the cabin. When I opened the door, I saw her standing there in the rain, eyes red, hair clinging to her face. Adam waited by the car, silent, letting her lead. She stepped forward and handed me an envelope. "You forgot this." Inside was the copy of the trust I'd given her. The pages were damp from her hands, the ink slightly blurred. "I read every line," she said. "Twice. And you're impossible," she said, laughing through tears. "You built a legal fortress out of sentiment. Your mother taught me well." She shook her head. "You could have just talked to me." "I did," I said quietly. "For years. You just stopped listening." She winced. "I know." We sat by the fire after that, the storm pressing against the cabin walls like an uninvited witness. "Do you really think I don't value what you built?" she asked finally. "I think," I said, "you value it differently. You see beauty in new beginnings. I see it in what survives them." She stared into the flames. "I wanted to make the house ours." "It already was," I said. "You just had to walk through it instead of over it." She covered her face with her hands and started to cry, quietly, like she didn't want to wake the ghosts. I moved to sit beside her. "Emily," I said gently, "this was never about punishment. It was about remembrance. I wanted you to feel what permanence costs." She wiped her eyes. "And what does it cost?" "Everything worth keeping." When the rain eased, she asked to see the lake. We walked to the dock, the boards slick under our shoes. The air smelled of pine and clean earth. "You used to bring me here," she said softly. "Mom would pack sandwiches and you teach me to skip stones. I could never get past 3 skips. You were impatient," I said. "I still am." We stood there for a while, listening to the water lap against the wood. Then she said, "I found Mom's letter." I turned to her. It was in the sewing desk. "I opened it last night." She took a breath. "Dad, she knew, didn't she? She knew this would happen someday." "She did," I said. "She wrote that letter the week before she passed. She told me to save it for when you forgot how much of her lives inside you." Tears welled again, but she didn't hide them this time. She said, "Don't let life make you think showing up is small." I think that's what I did. I stopped showing up. "You just flew too high for a while," I said. "The air's thinner up there. Hard to hear anyone calling your name." She smiled through the tears. "And you decided to ground me." "Temporarily," I said. Back at the cabin, Adam was waiting. He looked nervous, contrite. "I owe you an apology, Mike," he said. "The appraisal idea was mine. I thought I was being practical. I wasn't thinking about what it meant. I know, I said. You were trying to help her build a future. He nodded. But maybe the future isn't built by selling the past. Smart man, I said. Took me 40 years to learn that. He smiled. Took me one very angry father-in-law. That broke the tension. We all laughed, real laughter, tired but cleansing. After dinner, Emily asked if we could drive back together in the morning. I want to see the house again, she said. When we arrived, the sun was just coming up. The lawn shimmered with dew, the windows reflecting gold. She stepped out of the car and just stood there, eyes wide, taking it in like she was seeing it for the first time. Inside, everything was still spotless, but emptier now that my things were gone. She walked slowly from room to room, fingertips grazing the walls. It feels different, she whispered. Like it's holding its breath. It's waiting, I said. For what? For you to make peace with it. We reached the kitchen last. She stopped near the wall where Laura had once painted over the faint words "Keep this home kind." The paint had aged just enough that the message now showed through like a ghost. Emily touched the wall and gasped. Mom wrote this. She did, I said. I left it there for you to find. She smiled faintly. She was right. The house is kind. I wasn't. That's why I built the clause, I said. To protect the kindness when we forget. She turned to me, eyes shining. Dad, thank you. For protecting it. For protecting me. I felt something release in my chest, a tightness that had lived there for years. You don't owe me thanks, I said. You owe me Sunday dinners. That'll do. She laughed through the tears. Deal. That evening, before they left, she handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked. Something new, she said. I had the realtor draft an addendum, just in case. You're still the trustee, but I added one more line. I opened it. The sentence was simple. Upon the death of both grantors, the Carter House shall pass to the Carter Family Foundation, to be maintained as a community home for families in need. She looked at me nervously. I thought maybe, when I'm gone someday, someone else should get to start their story here. I stared at her for a long moment. You understand now. She nodded. It's not about owning it. It's about keeping it alive. I hugged her. Hard. You did good, kid. When they drove away that night, I stood on the porch, watching the taillights fade down the road. The wind rustled through the trees, and I swear I heard Laura's laugh in it, soft, proud, endless. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Because revenge had done its job, not as destruction, but as healing. It had turned hurt into harmony, distance into devotion, and memory into motion again. I looked up at the darkening sky and whispered, We did it, Laura. She came home. Then I went inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window. The house felt alive again, breathing, warm, forgiving. And as the first stars appeared above the roof, I realized something I'd been chasing for years. Sometimes love needs silence to echo loud enough to be heard. And sometimes revenge, when it's pure, doesn't end a story. It restores it. It's been 3 years since that summer, the one that changed everything. Sometimes I still wake up expecting the silence of that old house to sting, but it doesn't anymore. Now it hums, like a voice you finally learned how to listen to. Emily and Adam live there full-time now. They kept the promise, no major changes, no tearing down, no selling. Just gentle care. The paint is new in some places, the kitchen brighter, but Laura's handwriting still glows faintly beneath the fresh coat near the stairs. Keep this home kind. They've built their own family there too, a little boy, Thomas, born last year. He toddles through the hallway, leaving sticky fingerprints on everything sacred. And somehow, that feels right. A house without fingerprints isn't really alive. I still spend most of my days at the lake cabin. It's quieter there, and peace feels earned, not borrowed. Morning routines are simple: coffee on the porch, watching fog lift off the water, the sound of woodpeckers tapping like metronomes of time. I write sometimes. Nothing grand, just notes, thoughts, letters I'll never send. Old men need places to put their words, or they turn heavy. In one of those letters, I wrote something I think I finally understand. Revenge isn't about making others hurt. It's about making meaning out of the hurt they gave you. That's what I did, even if Emily never calls it that. She calls it redemption. I suppose that's a prettier word for the same truth. Every Sunday, they drive out to visit me. It started small, just lunches. Then Thomas started calling me Pops, and somehow Sunday became sacred again. Emily always brings pie. She pretends she baked it, but I know the box from Miller's Diner when I see it. I never say anything. Some truths don't need correcting. After we eat, she helps me tend the small garden Laura planted years ago. We talk about the past now without flinching. That's progress. Sometimes she apologizes again, as if I didn't already forgive her 100 times over. I always tell her the same thing. Sweetheart, guilt is like bad coffee. One sip is enough to wake you up, don't keep drinking it. She laughs every time. I think it's her way of thanking me. Last autumn, she invited me back to the house for Thanksgiving. I hesitated at first, too many ghosts in those walls, but she insisted. When I arrived, the smell hit me first: cinnamon, roasted turkey, something sweet baking in the oven. Music played softly from the old record player Laura used to love. And there, in the corner of the living room, stood a framed photo I'd never seen before: me, Laura, and a 7-year-old Emily sitting on the porch steps, sunburned and laughing. Below it, a brass plaque read, "The Carter House, built with love, kept with kindness." I didn't say anything. My throat was too tight. Emily saw me looking and came over quietly. "Do you like it?" I nodded. "She'd be proud." "So would you," she said. "You built it twice, once with wood, once with wisdom." I smiled at that. After dinner, I took Thomas out back to show him how to skip stones on the pond. He threw his first one too hard, it plunked straight in. He frowned. "That's all right," I said. "You'll get the hang of it. The trick isn't throwing harder. It's knowing when to let go." He nodded solemnly, as if I'd just handed him the secret of the universe. Maybe I had. Emily watched from the porch, camera in hand, tears glinting in her eyes. It struck me then, she wasn't photographing the view. She was capturing the feeling she almost lost. When they dropped me off at the cabin later that night, she lingered at the door. "Dad," she said, "I don't think I ever told you what I did with the fund." I raised an eyebrow. "The community one?" She nodded. "I took over management last year. We renamed it the Carter Foundation for Home Legacy. We've already helped 6 families keep their homes." I felt my chest tighten. "You did that?" She smiled. "No. We did. You planted it. I just made sure it grew." There was a quiet pride in her voice, not the boastful kind, but the kind that knows the price of growth. "I'm glad," I said softly. "That was your mother's dream." "I know," she said. "And yours was to make sure I didn't forget it." She kissed my cheek and whispered, "I never will." That night, after they left, I sat by the fire for a long time. The logs crackled, the lake shimmered under the moon, and I thought about everything that had led here, every wound, every word unsaid, every small mercy that built a bridge back to love. There was a time I thought revenge was about balance, weighing pain against pain. But now I see it differently. Revenge, when done with love, isn't a counterweight. It's a compass. It doesn't drag you backward, it points you home. And that's where I am now. A few weeks ago, Emily brought Thomas to spend a whole weekend with me. We built a birdhouse together, crooked, painted too bright, perfect in its imperfection. He signed the bottom in shaky letters. "Made with Pops." I hung it on the tree outside the window. Now every morning I watch bluebirds come and go, carrying tiny bits of straw and sunlight. Sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I can hear Laura's voice in the branches. Not words, just warmth, the sound of a promise kept. I'm not sure how many more summers I'll get. My hands ache now, and the doctor says my heart's taking its sweet time doing its job. I told him so am I. But if the end comes tomorrow, I'm ready. Because my daughter came home. Because our house still stands. Because love, once broken, learned how to breathe again. That's enough. I close my notebook, sip the last of my coffee, and look out at the lake. The sun is rising, and the reflection on the water looks like a second sky, as if life itself is giving me one more horizon to admire. I whisper, almost to the air, "Thank you, Laura, for teaching me that the hardest lessons are just love in disguise." Then I sit back, close my eyes, and let the morning light fill the room. Because this is what peace looks like, the quiet after forgiveness, the home rebuilt without a single nail, the silence that finally feels like music. If this story moved you, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment with your thoughts. To continue the journey, click the box on the left for the next story. Thank you for being here.